Well, welcome everyone to the second day of the Good Tech Fest. And today we will be kicking off the session from our end. And we really want to thank you first, Brittany, and the rest of the tech of the festival team for the support and for inviting us to talk about our projects here with you. I hope that you enjoyed the day. Today we will be talking for about 35 minutes, 40 minutes, and hopefully we can have a little bit of time afterwards for a bit of a Q&A. So really encourage you again, guys, because we're not a big group here, very open to keep some questions for the end, and then we can revisit back then when we finish with the talk. Without further ado, my name is Rafa. I'm a digital design consultant and co-founder of Conscious Digital, together with my colleague here, Yoav. We together started this charity, started this journey a few years back, and that's kind of what we're gonna talk about today. We both have experience working on small scale startups as well as 400 to 500 corporations. So you can imagine that we've seen a lot of good stuff and a lot of really bad stuff in our journey building tech together. So one of the things that, in fact, going through that shady side of the businesses brought us together is that we believe, both of us, that we could create data-centered initiatives in the digital world that can promote and advance digital human rights. So for us, we believe that that's one of the most important things that we could be doing in tech, and this is what we started working together in few initiatives towards those goals. So the first of those, let's see if it works. There you go. First of those goes back to 2019, and this is what we actively started working together. In 2018, the General Data Protection Regulation was launched in Europe. It's called GDPR. You might have heard from it, which basically helps individuals to exercise the rights, the data rights about their data, always all hosted. You will see in our journey that companies don't particularly like to delete data from people. They don't wanna get rid of it. They will actually make it quite hard in many cases. And also somehow back in 2018, for those that maybe are currently based in Europe back then, we've been bombarded by emails from companies trying to ask us for consent so then they can use our data, which turns in a weird kind of mix of events into a situation where people, like users, like everyone, individuals, will have a weird relationship with GDPR. Although GDPR is for them, people see GDPR as a bit of a conflict. It's like something that's annoying because we have a lot of companies sending us emails. But far from that, what GDPR wanted to do is to support in ways that the users could start requesting the deletion of their data in companies, as well as the visibility to that data. So you could also request to see what data company had from you and change that data if you wanted to. So when we were going through those things, we realized that these companies, when they were trying to implement these GDPR regulations, they were doing really bad services, really poor UX that led normally to very frustrated users that they don't want to then get into the hassle of deleting the data. So we will be going through a few of these things in our talk, and hopefully you can see a little bit of understand a little bit more depth of what we're talking about here. But then at the back of that one, as I say, we realized that there's stuff that we could do, and we launched digitalrights.org. This is a very small application. It was launched in 2018, as we said, right before GDPR. And what we did, a little bit for the technical audience in here, within 1 week, we crawled the internet, we crawled the top 1,000 Alexa websites and collected the privacy emails where we could reach these companies too. We put it all of that into a database. Well, we call it database. It's actually a Google spreadsheet online. And we built an application on top of that within a week. So as you can see, we went to a very, very minimal valuable product super quickly to try to have something out there so then the users could start experimenting with this. We made it quite simple. Basically, it's 2 clicks. You go into search for the company you want to delete your information from. fill 2 or 3 forms, form fields, and then you can send that email to the company to request that deletion. So that was pretty simple. But then we have one of the biggest challenges here, which often happens when you build in tech, which is that we were fulfilling a user need. We knew that this is important for the users, but because of all the conflict with GDPR and the unknowns of data, the users, the big population, didn't actually know yet that they needed this service, which made it quite challenging for us. So at the back of that, we got 3 key pillars when we were building this application. The first one is that it needs to be super, super simple, that the user needs to get there and then just do that in the blink of an eye, no question asked. Second one is that it needs to be trustworthy and official as much as possible. It's what we started using Blue. We were very careful in the design. We were very, very careful in the UX, so that we have a very clear language that we put into the service, and everything all kind of tied up towards a good experience for the user. That was very important for us. And the third one is that it needs to be searchable and findable, which is basically what we all know about ACO. How do we position a product out there, which is free? It's a service completely for free, but the users need to go there, find it, and then use it to activate this exercise about rights. So at the back of that one, that ACO situation, that was kind of our big problems at the beginning. You will see in the next slide, sorry, that we didn't have a lot of traction at the beginning. So we put the website online. It was out there for Europe at the back of GDPR, and we have very low traction up to April. I believe that GDPR was launched around March time, but we didn't have a lot of traction, to the point that in April 28th, we went up to 5,000 users in a single day. My colleague Yoav here called me. It's like, hey, dude, something's happening here. I don't know what's happening. This is awesome, but I actually don't know what's happening here. We started to look a little bit deeper in what is going on here, because we did some work in SEO, but you know, like it's multiplied 5,000 times. That's a lot, right? Like, how crazy is this? We started to dig in a little bit deeper. So then we saw some of the recordings from the application, and we realized that most people will come and try to opt out and delete their data from NKL associates. You might ask, as well as we did, who are NKL associates? We've got an idea who these are. So then we keep digging, and we see that in our application, you've got a search bar. That search bar is where you search for a company, so you can opt out from them. And we see that our users get there and start typing, and you can see at the very bottom of the thread that they get to names like Evanoti. Everything was very confusing here. We didn't really know what was going on. We didn't know who NKL associates were. We don't know why we've got 5,000 people opting out from this company. And then we check on Evanoti, and we realize that she's a very famous actress in the adult industry. Have you ever surprised? Have you ever kind of conflicted surprise? In a way, it was like, I don't know what's happening here. You need to picture a user that goes into the internet searching for this type of needs, and then they landed our website, and we gave them a form to request the data deletion. It's very different kind of feelings, I guess, that the user will be getting. But then it showed us one very important thing. We showed us 2 things, actually. One is, first, again, we need to be super, super clear and make the language even easier for the users to understand what's happening here. And the second one is that users, when they see our product, they don't know where to start. They know, if you get into the product, you know that you want to get rid, you want to delete your data from a company, but you don't really know where to start. You don't know who have your data. You've got no clue. And this is where our little story begins.
All right, so we are about 4.5 years later. We have about 15,000 requests that are running through the service today. We are a bit more mature and understanding about the flow of the users. And we are a registered charity, which means we're not here for the money, we're here for the impact. So what does impact mean for us? So we measure success by the number of requests that are sent by our service every month. Now, why are these data requests so important? They are important for three reasons. The first one is the more obvious one. You can get your data deleted. You can take back ownership of your online privacy. But there are two other reasons. The second one is that it sends every request we sends a message to these companies that we care about our personal data. And reason number three, maybe the most important one, is that it incurs a cost. Processing the request, which is generally not automated or hard to automate, costs a small but not insignificant amount of money. And by sending many requests, we make the overall profitability of collecting personal data lesser to these companies. So requests are our North Star, but we had a problem. We had no visibility into what happened to these requests after they are sent. Our service by default collects no user information, no personal information. So we have no user accounts. We have no long-lasting relationship with the users, and we have no way of knowing what happens to the requests later on. But because the requests were so important for us, we wanted to dig in. So we came up with this idea of running an experiment. We sent, both me and Rafa sent data requests before, but we wanted to do it on a bigger scale. So we decided to come up with a list of companies, send them all data deletion requests, and see what happens, understand the data, and understand where are we having impact, are we not having impact. And we also wanted to make this interesting in the sense that we wanted to go after the worst offenders. We didn't want to go after companies that are sure to comply. We wanted to have a little bit of friction, understand what happens down the road, also when a company gives the person a hard time. Luckily for us, there is already an industry of worst offenders. They are called the data broker industry. And in case you don't know, data brokers are companies that collect and trade in your personal information. And generally, they don't provide any direct value to you. Their entire business model is predicated on personal data. And we were pretty sure that they would give us a hard time when we were going to try and delete our data from their systems. So we needed a list of all these data brokers. The problem when we started to look into it was that nobody that we could see was tracking that ecosystem. It's quite an important subset of the market. They're selling your data to advertising companies. They're selling it to social networks. But there was no clear source of truth about how big this industry is. So with some effort, we put together a website called databrokerswatch.org. And we combined a bunch of different lists. We found out that in some jurisdictions, these companies have to register. So we slowly curated a database, also with the help of our community, of about 800 companies. And then with some open source intelligence, we gathered contact details for about 680 out of these companies. And then we sent them all data deletion requests, and happy and content, we went out for a drink.
So we did go for a drink. And then each of us, as we said, we sent about 300 of them. And then we waited for about 10 days. After those 10 days, everyone, like all of the data brokers, every company, every one of them, responded to us and confirmed that our data has been deleted from the databases. They've also confirmed that they blacklisted our credentials for further trades. So what that means is that once they've got our data, they will make sure that they never collect the data ever again. All of that was really easy, but the best part of it is that they confirmed that because they've been trading with our information for the past 10 years, and since the data belonged to us initially, they will share the profits of these transactions with us equally and fairly. So we get a compensation from the work, from the experience that we had with them in the past 10 years. As you can probably imagine already, that's really not what happens, right? Like that never really happens. They make it super, super hard for us. We didn't took this picture. We took it from a free database. And in fact, I would actually also highlight here that we're the first ones that believe that having your phone on the table is of bad manners. So we shouldn't have this. But we wanted to express here with this little story, our vision. this is definitely what we wanted to go to. We believe in a world where companies are a little bit more honest, a little bit more ethical, and they believe that they can, we trust them to give us the information. We also wanted to highlight here the cost of our data. Our data is very important, and it's not only important, it's making people and these industries very rich. So those are the things that somehow encapsulate our vision. But in the contrary, well, and long story short, this is really not what happens. And what really happens is it went really sideways, and we're going to show you now some of our favorites.
So yeah, as Rafa said, it was a good example of how bad things are in this industry. We'll go into the numbers in a minute, but I think maybe the most interesting thing to talk about is the dark patterns that we encountered when we tried to opt out of these companies. So a dark pattern is a design, it can be for a website or for anything, that intentionally is trying to trick people. So we want to talk about these dark patterns that we have identified because they come up often. There are about 10 of them. They repeat also for other companies, not just for data brokers. And over time, we've developed a bunch of countermeasures, way to work around those tricks in order to ensure that data requests are being complied with. So we're sharing this today. We hope you'll never need them, but if you do, we hope you find them useful. So dark pattern number 1, fill a form. So this is when you send a data deletion request, you get back an email asking you to go online and fill a form. Now, these forms are long, these forms are complicated, and they suck all the life out of you. And most, or a lot of people just give up at some point. The interesting thing is, under the GDPR, we don't have to deal with these forms. Our email is actually enough. So we write back, in this case to LexisNexis, and we tell them, in response to your request to fill a form, please know that I do not have such an obligation. If there is any legal requirement for me to do so, please send me a link to the relevant legal act. And lo and behold, it works. They comply. We've tried this also with the CCPA, and even though it's not legally required, companies comply. Next pattern, dark pattern, excessive info. So this is when the company is asking for more information than they need in order to verify your identity. In this case, this company, Hybrid Theory, is asking for a copy of my passport or my driving license. Now, according to both CCPA and GDPR, they are supposed to verify your identity. Otherwise, this will be ripe with abuse. The thing is that the verification needs to be proportionate. So if I'm opting out of a financial institution, it makes sense that it will go into a lengthy verification process. But if I'm opting out, like in this case, from a company that I have no relationship with, and they are basically living off my data, they are not regulated by anyone, then an email verification should be enough. So we write to them and we tell them, dear Hybrid Theory, your request for photo of my passport or driving license is excessive and requires disproportionate effort on my side. I have already provided all the information necessary to identify me in your system. Therefore, according to the GDPR, I do not need to provide any further information. And again, we've tested this and this worked. This is both for the GDPR and CCPA. And the key here is the disproportionate effort that is actually lifted from the regulation. That is what the regulation is trying to protect from. Moving on, pattern number 3, show me the data. So you'd think that when you ask a company to delete your data, they would search their system for your information and delete it. But these companies are lazy, and more than lazy, they're trying to make it hard for us. So instead of them searching for the information, they're asking us to do their work. In this case, Chris from White Pages is asking me to send him the URL from their website of where I've found my information. Now, I'm in no position to search their system. So I write back and say, your request to initiate manual search is disproportionate to my side. And even if I could do that, there is no guarantee that your system has avoided errors, typos, or other mistakes in association with my data. In other words, you do the work, you search. This is valid both for CCPA and GDPR, and it works. Next one, Multiple requests. So this is when a company has multiple programs or products or services, and they force us to make a separate request for each one of those. In this case here, the company is called EAB, and it's usually on a form where you don't really have another option. They have about 20 different programs. Guess what? Most people just give up. But we write back to them and we tell them, please delete all my data from all your programs, require me to submit a separate request for each program requires disproportionate effort on my side and is not permitted. Again, tested and works. Dark pattern number 5, cookie identifiers. So this is when a company asks you to go on their website for one of two reasons. Scenario number 1, they want to read a cookie that they've placed there before that identifies you, they're using it to track you, and that's how they find the rest of the information that they have on you. Second option is they want you to go on their website to place a cookie there because they're collecting information about everyone, and they use the cookie to know who opted out. Both of those are nonsense. In the first case, if they have collected personal information on you, they can use that information to identify you in their system. They don't need the cookie. And in the second case, if they're collecting information on everyone, that's already wrong. And to mark you for opting out, what happens if you delete your cookies, you use a different device, use a different browser, doesn't make sense. And again, we write to them regarding the cookie identifier, I might have deleted it or visited one of your affiliated services with a different device at different times, and therefore delete my data. Next one, assuming do not sell. So do not sell is a particular right that consumers have under the CCPA, which is already surprising because we send them a GDPR request, but we've seen many companies assume that everything is CCPA. The thing about do not sell is that it asks a company not to sell our information to any other company, but the company is allowed to keep our information. That is a weaker request in deletion request. What this company is doing is saying, please note that when we receive a request to opt out, delete, do not sell, a consumer personal information, we interpret these requests as do not sell request because that permits us to maintain customer information in a suppression file, which allows us to prevent that information from being added to our database at a later date. Now, there is some sense there because if we request them to delete all our data and then later on they were to come across our data a second time, how would they know not to collect it again? However, both CCPA and GDPR have already anticipated this option, this case, and they both permit under a deletion request the keeping a suppression list. As long as the data in that suppression list is the minimum necessary to identify you. So that can be an email or that can be a hash of an email. What these guys are trying to do is basically relabel their entire database as a suppression list so that they can keep all your data and it's happy days for them. Again, we tell them, please interpret my deletion request as a deletion request rather than a do not sell request. Quite cheeky. Pattern number 7. So this is super popular and annoying. This is broken process. So in the email that they send you, there are broken links or the website doesn't work or their forms are broken. And it's very, very popular. I'll show you this example. So you go on their form, you try to opt out, you click opt out, try again, you see where maybe there's something wrong. It's a very simple form. Try as you may, you can't opt out. This is super convenient because it gives them the illusion or it gives the illusion like they have a viable a flow for you to opt out of. So they can always point and say, yeah, there is an option to opt out. We just happen to have a technical problem, but that's not really how it is. Number 8, it's personal. That's when you suddenly end up in front of a real person and they have an excuse like they are not working there anymore, or maybe they're out of the office, you should contact someone else. It just so shows how the lack of seriousness around that they have around this particular customer touch point. Number 9, mobile ID. So mobile advertisers have this really nice feature provided to them by Android and iPhone, which is a stable identifier that they use to track you across different applications. Because it's just a string of characters, they tend to treat it like it's not personal information. They ask you to provide it when you try to delete your data, but it does become personal identifying over time. Now, to show the miserable state of this industry, including Google, if you go into your Android phone and actually manage to find this, then you need to copy it and put it on their website, but you can't copy this. You can click on it. And the only thing you have left to do is copy this character by character into their form on their website, which you can, as you can imagine, many people just don't bother with. The tip here, though, is that on later versions of Android, you can actually reset this ID, and it's actually a really good practice to reset this ID on a regular basis because it interrupts the data collection process. And then last one, not really a pattern, more of an example of the weird replies that we get sometimes. Please understand that we have removed your personal information from our database, Vivalink. It will not be transferred to life sciences companies, so they will no longer be able to contact you on any channel to provide scientific information about their products. Again, they're making it sound like it's a sad thing, but it's actually exactly what we wanted to happen. Also, I have no idea what they mean, provide scientific information about their products. It's just weird. Moving on.
We've learned a few things, as you can imagine, right? Like a lot of that stuff is very frustrating. It's going to be irritating. In many ways, hopefully, you got some of the tips that we've used here for your benefits in case that you need to use them. But in between lines, there's also a few things that we wanted to highlight from our learnings. Starting with, this is primarily an US issue. So you can go to databrokerswatch.org. Now, in the website that we showed at the beginning, you can also see that the biggest concentration of these companies are based in the US. Around 600 of them are over there. And most of them also collect only information about the US. So only if you're based there or you have any interactions with the US, they might be trading with that information, but not with the rest of the world. So that's kind of one of the learnings. You can read in between lines as much as you want, but that's kind of what we got at the back of it. Second one is, oops, let me see. There we go. The process is not generic. So through this website, we realized, or we actually kind of spotted that some of them have a very similar service behind it. So, when you go to a website, it's in the privacy section, etc., etc. So some of those are similar. It feels that it's often like an open source project that they collected, or maybe like a third-party application that they integrated into their websites, which makes it in a way very infuriating in two ways. One is that the government and the regulations are not promoting a good practice towards these things. They're not specifically saying how this needs to happen in favor to the user per se. And the second one is that it makes it really complicated for us because you don't have, what I mean like all of us as a users, because you don't have a pattern, right? You need to go individually, one by one, follow different steps and do different things. It's a bit of a chaos, right? So what happens with this is that we basically would encourage to go and then just go over all of them at the same time, because that could be a little bit confusing. And also be hard to track. So, this is one of the sidetrack that we've learned. Another one in here, if I can go to the next slide. Oops. Sorry. It takes an average of 10 days for the first response, which means that the process is not automated. In the experiment, as we said before, we've got it took around 10 days. However, we were doing the dry run this morning about this talk, and while we were talking, we actually received another one that they just started 3 months after we started the experiment. So you can see there's a big kind of difference with the timings to action this process. But in the medium, it's around 10 days, which means that the project is not automated and is significant as well in the context of incurring the cost of the organizations, and why sending requests is very important. As I said before, we don't really recommend to spam organizations because it could be quite counterproductive, but definitely doing that in a semi-regular basis, it could be a really good practice there. sorry, so here we go. And then one of my favorite ones, not allocating resources is as malicious as not complying. This was a very interesting conversation that we both had when we were doing the experiment, because I'm a little bit of an optimist. When I'm going through these things, I have a bit of a sympathy for the people behind. You know, we work in tech, we know what's behind there. You know, the people, the tech, the code, and the different languages. So, you know, there's a little bit of empathy, thinking, well, you know, I'm pretty sure that these people is not trying to do this maliciously. They're not on purpose putting that checkbox that cannot be checked. But then with Yoav, we have another contrasted opinion, which is that basically not allocating resources is as bad as doing that wrongly. So yes, granted, the individual that is making the code itself is not trying to make our lives miserable. However, the person above the chain, when it's allocating budgets and prioritizing the backlog of the thing that's going to do it, and all these people there don't pay any attention to any of that. So that is as malicious as not actually complying with the law. In our views, it's basically at equal level when we're going down here. And yeah, sorry, the very last one, just a little bit of throwing stats here as a recap of the whole experiment. On the left, the charts, you can see that about 40% of them have complied, quarter decline our request, and a third, the emails of credentials were not found or were invalid. So what we mean with not invalid is all of these emails that maybe they bounced or they didn't actually go anywhere. On that breakdown, it's only showing the list. You know, we have a list of 17 data brokers. We only collected around 600 of those emails, and that's the breakdown of the ones that we basically experimented with. In the right-hand side, what you can see is within the decline process, the percentages of process error and no response. So we have a very big amount of users from those 600 companies from those 600 companies that they didn't even get back to us. They just kind of, it's just like that. So overall, if we mix all of that stuff, so all of the emails, sorry, all of the different response, we only have about a third of our data deleted, of about a third of those companies from our data deleted. So it's a step. You know, it's obviously better than it was a year ago, but in fact, it's really not as good as it should be for the times that we're living in.
All right, so I think we can say generally that although there are quite a bit of data brokers that are respecting the data privacy laws, the vast majority of them doesn't. No emails, no replies, dirty tricks. It's pretty sad. But cheer up, it's not all bad, there is hope. First, remember that these particular companies, the data brokers, are the worst offenders. This does not reflect the overall picture of across the entire industry. Second thing is that enforcement is catching up. So over the last 4 years, we've seen a steady uptick in the enforcement of GDPR-related complaints. A similar uptick is emerging in CCPA. So what does enforcement mean? Under the GDPR, every country has a data protection agency, or DPA for short, and you can go to the DPA and complain, and they will investigate the case and they can fine the organization. Alternatively, individuals have what is called a private right of action. You can take the company to court. It's kind of similar under the CCPA. Currently, the Attorney General of California is responsible for enforcement. Next year, there's a new watchdog with extra sharp teeth called the California Privacy Protection Agency that we will take over enforcement, and we hope to see even more enforcement happening then. And also in California, individuals can take a company to court, although the maximum compensation is severely limited compared with the GDPR. Now, we need enforcement because the only way we're going to get these worse offenders, but also a lot of other companies that are not completely complying or not complying on time with these regulations is if there is more enforcement. So we've taken our learnings from this experiment and from running this service for the last 4 years. And we try to figure out how can we help with enforcement, because it's the next logical step. And we've decided to do the same things that we've done initially in terms of creating a wonderful user experience around submitting requests, just around escalating to the data protection agencies. So recently we've launched a set of new capabilities to your digital rights that we call follow-ups. This is completely optional. Basically, after you submit a request, you can opt in to receive an email from us that will ask you what happened with the request. How did the company do? And according to your reply, we will recommend a follow-up action. Now that can be to send a reminder email, or it can be to escalate to the data protection agency. And with a click of a button, an email will be created that will contain all the information that they need, including and directed to the right data protection agency and the right person there, and with the hopes of making the whole escalation process much easier. And we think that's the key for the next step. So that's all we have for you today. Before we break into questions, I wanted to shout out to Incogni. Incogni is a service created by Surfshark. Surfshark are creators of a VPN software. They have a new service called Incogni, which opts you out of about 100 data brokers automatically and makes sure that your data stays off of their system. Now, they are good friends, and their legal department has been instrumental in coming up with some of those countermeasures. So we asked them, and they gave us a discount code for you guys if you want to check it out. And that's also a way of supporting us. So thank you, and thanks to the Good Tech Fest for this wonderful opportunity. And we're happy to take any questions. Feel free to unmute yourselves, or if you want to ask on Slack, or if you want to ask on the chat here.
Or if you've got any comments that you want to add, I'm sure that some of you guys might have experience trying to opt out from something in the past.
That's actually a good question. Do you guys have any first-hand experience with this sort of stuff?
One thing I'm curious to know, so working as a UX designer myself, I speak to my friends with this kind of stuff, and they often say that they don't really care. So do you think there's anything that you guys, or have you thought about anything you could do to be able to show how people's data is being used and make it seem more important to get this message out there even more so? I don't know if that makes sense what I'm trying to say to you guys, but do you get me?
Yeah, I think you're touching on a very important point, and it's something that we've been asked to do before. What many people ask is, this is great, but who should I opt out of? Can you help me, and can you recommend? And we have in plan to create something akin to a privacy-minded personal assistant that will watch your how you interact with different companies and recommend for you who you should opt out of. That is still a long way from where we are, but you're definitely touching on an important point. We hear you.
But also even a way to show people how the data is being used. I don't think you guys touched on that. I've been on the site, wasn't sure I've seen it. Like with my friends who aren't tech savvy, they just don't really care. And is there a way, have you guys thought about, have you seen a way to be able to show by the steps you've taken on these websites with these cookies, this is now how it's being used, and people are making money from it to kind of make the penny drop a little better or harder?
That's definitely a conversation that we've been thinking about quite a lot, actually, because when you put things in terms of numbers, figures, like actually how much it is, like what's the money that this is generating in a way, yeah. It gets very abstract. It gets super abstract because you a very tiny piece on the bigger monster. Often these companies deal with volumes, so it gets quite complex to pinpoint and actually express that value in a specific figure. We're always trying to kind of find ways into put it this a little bit more obvious, but often we just said that, hey, look at the big companies that get rich, and that's pretty much what we normally say.
I think you're right. It's a general problem in the privacy industry that people don't understand the problem or the severity of the problem enough when you talk about the general public. I think we're all trying to find ways to better educate. I can just say that when the time is right, so we get most of the people who come to our service through SEO. Now, when someone is searching, how do I delete my data from some company? Now, some of these people, when they are angry, they have so much energy, they will not only go onto our website and fill the form and send a request, they will email us asking us for help. They will add a feature to our roadmap asking for help, and they will open a bug on our bag tracker asking for help. So there is a lot of energy there when the time is right. Generally speaking, you're right.
Cool. Thanks very much. I found this super useful.
Thank you very much. So it's 1:45, guys. We need to kind of start leaving the room for the next session. But I just want to say once again, echo what Yoav said. Thank you so much. We're still going to be in Slack if you've got any questions. So please feel free to reach out to our emails if you want. We're very happy to hear from any of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ciao.